All right, hi everyone. Welcome to this edition of Believe in Bills. Adam Benigni and Sal Maiorana. Believe in Bills, of course, presented by FanDuel. Trade deadline edition. The 4 p.m. Eastern deadline has come and gone. And Sal, today, what we're talking about is the fact that they didn't make a deal.
Yeah.
It looked as if they might with the Taron Johnson contract and everything, and that Beane had tried to free up some space, but they wind up remaining idle. So we don't know what happened behind closed doors. Beane's always on the phone. We assume he made attempts, but nothing happens, and they're kind of standing pat with this roster as it is, coming off a very significant win over the Kansas City Chiefs. Your take on the inaction today?
I'm wondering what FanDuel had on the odds of the Bills not doing anything, because they clearly had some needs that they could have or positions that could have fortified. Now, I understand that we've talked about this forever. Like, what were they really going to do with the limited cap space? And then they make the move, the reported move. And I think it did happen because I noticed on Spotrac their salary cap number did change. But they freed up some money from Taron Johnson's contract, and I think they started the day with about $3.3 million. So there was room to maneuver to bring in somebody. Some of the guys whose names that were popping up would have fit inside $3.3 million pretty easily. So I don't know. I don't know if Beane, I'm sure he was working the phones. There's no doubt that he was trying to get something done. I'm just wondering what the asks were, because when you look at it, Adam, there weren't a huge amount of deals. There were some very notable deals by the Jets, especially.
Sure.
But you wonder what the asking price is. And, one of the things that people have to understand, and I know you do, but I'll share it with our viewers. When you're paying the quarterback as much as you are, and when you're as tight to the salary cap as they are, and they're going to be in future years, you really can't be pissing away your draft picks to get rentals for 9 games this year. As important as they may seem, because this team does have some issues, you can't just keep giving away draft picks. He gave away, a 3rd rounder for Amari Cooper? Could have used that this year. I mean, you can't keep doing that, because you've got to bring in draft picks who can help your team at a low cost, because your salary cap is blown away by so many high-priced contracts. So I think ultimately that's probably what happened today.
Yeah, that was the model that the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, and the Patriots really demonstrated for all those years of their dominance. And they would rework Tom's contract, and he would take less and make sure. But the key to it is, in the modern NFL, is having the maximum number of key contributors that you can on your roster that are on their rookie contracts, right? Yeah. Surrounding a franchise QB. That is the model for success. And so the Bills, obviously, with what they're paying Josh Allen, and as they move forward and try and keep this window extended and open for as long as they possibly can, that is what overriding in terms of what they kind of guides them in terms of what they try and can and can't do, or choose not to do, as the case we presume was today. So how much do you think the outcome against Kansas City on Sunday, that 28-21 win, influenced what didn't happen today?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, had they lost that game, they're 5-3. They're in a little bit of trouble in the division and in the conference too. So that is something that probably drove their desire to get something done today. Now they're 6-2. They're only a half game out of the 3 teams are 7-2 leading the conference. They're only a half game back. So it's just we talk about on this show, Adam, about the ups and downs of these seasons and how crazy every week it changes, because it's not baseball and hockey and basketball. One game matters humongous amount in the NFL. So yeah, beating the Chiefs and getting to 6-2, I'm sure that probably maybe changed their thinking about, giving away a draft pick again for a player who's probably going to be a rental. So look, the area, I mean, I thought that wide receiver is a place that they needed to add. They just don't have anybody who's able to get downfield and get open. So I get that. But Adam, defensive line is really a place where they're rolling the dice now. I mean, he's relying on Jordan Phillips and Fedarian Mathis and Zion Logue on this roster at D tackle. That's worrisome. And we talked about it the other day. Harrison Phillips just felt like the exact player that they needed. He would have fit. He would have fit before they even did the Taron Johnson contract. And given what the Jets were doing today with what looked like a fire sale, man, you're telling me Harrison Phillips wasn't available to get? That seems a little surprising to me. But yeah, more Federi and Mathis. Boy, that's worrisome.
You know, I really felt as if the Harrison Phillips deal was going to happen during the course of the week, and that it would have. By the way, I mean, I warned you before we started recording this that there's some noise outside here at the house, and that there may be an eruption. And so
that's okay. My dog barked over here too. You didn't hear him.
There's two of the three.
Oh, there you go.
That I was sort of able to get back in there, in position. One is still roaming here in the office, but I'll try and mute the mic as quickly as possible. I was a little slow to the trigger that time, but I've got things settled down for the moment. There may be another eruption here in a moment, but I felt like, it raised, and receivers obviously, a huge thing that there had been a clamoring among the fan base. I don't know to what extent. I don't think that one game changes the complexion of that, I guess is the point that I want to make. And I'm sure that the Bills view that through a wider lens too. They would have to, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, they clearly they do. Look, I mean, Shaheed was a name that kept coming up. And I think the Saints ended up dealing him to the Seahawks for a 4th and 5th round pick. Seems palatable. I mean, that seems palatable. You weren't giving away a day 2 pick there if you're the Bills. Maybe they asked for more from the Bills, knowing how desperate they were. I don't know. But, I said this right along, even with Shaheed, is he really a guy who was going to come in here and make a tremendous difference on the team? I don't know. I mean, Chris Olave, I would have thought more about Chris Olave, who was a better player, but I'm sure the asking price was too high for the Bills on that one. Plus his contract is bigger. So look, people I already see on Twitter, people are ready to fire Beane and they're going crazy that he didn't make a move. I just don't think, Adam, that you can't just deal the deal, right? It's got to make sense for your team. And I'm not going to kill him for this. Now, if he had $15 million in cap room to play with, that's a whole different story because, as we just said, there are places that they need help. But given their cap situation, his hands are kind of tied. So I'm not going to kill him for this. We'll see how it plays out, and where their season goes from here. But, I'm not ready to throw my hands up and say fire Brandon Beane over today.
Oh, there's no firing of Brandon Beane, my goodness. But, he is on the hook for that receiving core, right? We've talked about that, and he's defended it staunchly. And look, they produced, although the complexion of that passing game wasn't exactly all inclusive, right? On Sunday and the win over the Chiefs. Great output from the tight ends, obviously. On a defensive point to make here, I mean, he's taken a lot of heat for not enough impact in terms of his high draft picks. But I think what that game changed the complexion of a little bit for me at this point in the season is now you look right at a Deion Walker, right? Now you look at Cole Bishop should probably lead the point, right? With the game that he had, you hope that that's really a breakthrough for him, and some level of that type of consistency and output can continue moving forward. And then with Hairston, I mean, don't you feel kind of a lot better about where things stand with some of the impact of these young players coming out of a grand stage game like that against your arch rival, and they had significant impacts on that game.
Yeah, look, I mean, 2 weeks ago, we probably talked about it. Cornerback, to me, felt like the biggest need on the team because Tre'Davious White clearly is not the same player, and Max Hairston was still on injured reserve, and you really weren't sure, when he was going to come back and how useful he was really going to be after missing so much time. Well, here we are 2 weeks later. He's played 2 games, and he looks like he's fit right in to this team, and he looks like he can certainly handle the speed of the NFL. We saw him run stride for stride with Xavier Worthy on a few plays the other day. So that makes me feel a lot better about the cornerback room. They've got 3 now. I think at some point here, Hairston probably needs to be on the field more. than Trey White. They were exactly 30-30 on the snaps the other day. That should start skewing, I think, towards Hairston. And then you've got, 3 guys that you could at least go to. You've got a little bit of depth. Jamarcus Ingram, I'm not really sold on him as a number 4, but they're in better shape now with Max Hairston back on the team than they were 2 weeks ago, when I think both you and I were saying it has to be a cornerback. They have to get a cornerback in. Well, now they don't. So it'll be curious to see what happens on the defensive line. I mean, maybe there's going to be a free agent available that they could pluck off the waiver wire. Some teams do make some moves right after the trade deadline with their roster to fit guys in who they've just acquired. So maybe somebody pops free here, but I'm kind of thinking that's not going to happen. And, I guess they're saying Daquan Jones is getting closer. Maybe he can get back this week. That would certainly help the D tackle rotation. And Jordan Phillips is on the 53 now, so he'd be the 4th. I guess you got to live with it, man. But, we'll get back to this Michael Hoyt injury. That is why that's such a crusher.
Massive.
Because he was clearly the option that they were thinking of. And we talked about it. I told you before that game, I think this is what's going to happen. They're going to use him on the inside because they don't have 4 D tackles right now. And now that's gone. So, man, that's a crushing loss, which is why today I was thinking all along, they got to add a defensive lineman, and they didn't.
They didn't. But that's what surprises me the most. I felt like it was going to be like a Harrison Phillips deal was going to be natural. I felt like that they could A, afford him, and B, that the ask would be reasonable. I felt like that could work out, that was a reasonable deal given their cap situation and everything else. I'm a little bit surprised that it didn't happen. And we'll see if Beane talks on Wednesday, if there's any explanation at all or whatever as to what he tried to do and what he ultimately wound up
there
not
was
doing
even
and why
did
he
you
ultimately
did
not
you see
doing
Tim
Go ahead.
Did you see Tim Graham put out that tweet Tim Graham put out a tweet, I don't know, about 3:00 that insinuated that they must have been talking to the Commanders, and the names that came up were Deboo Samuel and Von Miller. Now, Deboo Samuel, really, I don't know if that was really happening. I'm not sure what they were thinking there. He's a slot receiver. They don't need a slot receiver. I mean, he can play a little bit on the outside, but Von Miller was sort of interesting because obviously knows the defense, can come right in. He could play the edge. And then I'm thinking to myself, as that was happening, well, if they bring him back, maybe Greg Rousseau becomes the Michael Hoyt player on 3rd downs and move him inside, because they have toyed with that a little bit. It hasn't happened a lot, but they have done it occasionally. So I'm thinking, well, okay, bring in Von Miller. He's affordable on his contract because most of it was signing bonus. He can plug in as your edge rusher and you move in Rousseau. But not even that. They couldn't even get that done. If it was even in the works, they didn't get it done. So, yeah, I mean, we come away a little bit surprised at him. But then again, like I said, I'm not overly surprised that he couldn't get anything done because of their situation.
All right. FanDuel Super Bowl odds. Let's revisit that right now, coming out of the 28-21 win over the Chiefs on Sunday. Chiefs still the favorite, plus 600. Buffalo up from 4th to 2nd at plus 700 now.
Still seems high to me.
Yeah, it does. But it was a statement. Right? I suppose it speaks to the complexion of the win, right? And kind of a statement.
Yeah.
Win for the Bills and the aspects we've talked about on defense, where they certainly raised their game, and Josh Allen, right, who looked far more himself. That'll do a lot for Vegas lines and things of that nature. So that's going to do it. Once again, the Bills idle at the trade deadline as they move forward. And now on Thursday, we'll start looking ahead to the second matchup of the season with the Miami Dolphins. So for Sal Maiorana, the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, I'm Adam Benigni, WGRZ-TV and Sports Talk Live Buffalo. Thanks for being with us here on Believe in Bills, presented by FanDuel.